Thank you very much, Samir, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A big shout out to all the young people out there. So glad that you are here. After all, it's the future we are discussing, and you are the future. You are the custodians of the Sustainable Development Goals legacy. It's been very enriching to be at this event. Congratulations to the Indian G20 presidency for making development a priority and digitally driven development and data for development a priority within the theme of development. I think this is much needed. You've heard about the slide back on the Sustainable Development Goals. So 1.7 billion people are in distress today because of inflation, rising cost of living, poverty, food insecurity. And we have slid back in terms of progress on Agenda 2030 to 2016. 6 years have been lost on the SDGs agenda. And there's no way we can catch up if we do not leverage the digital opportunity, if we do not move on to the next paradigm on data for development. You've heard during the side event that there are two aspects to it, and this is somewhat of an artificial categorization. There is data on the SDGs, which is how do you measure progress, where do we stand, how do you monitor and evaluate impact, and how do you make sure that government policies or the actions by philanthropic organizations and other stakeholders are having the desired impact. Today, it's possible to use real-time data to do that. You've heard many examples. One of the recent examples is monitoring plastic pollution in the lower Mekong Basin, which is the lifeblood of more than 65 million people in the Southeast Asian region. So colleagues at the UN Environment Programme are using IoTs, sensors, AI to monitor point sources of these pollution, the plastics pollution, and address that at source. The other aspect is data for the SDGs, where you can extract public value intelligence from data sets. A question that I've asked myself in the 5+ years of working in this domain is that if Google, Amazon, Alibaba, and others can extract such rich value from privately held data sets, why can't we do it in the public sector domain? So this is part of the paradigm shift that I'm talking about, deriving public value intelligence from data sets that are aggregated, that are high quality, that correspond to common data models related to problems in context. So that's the opportunity that's out there. And you can put figures on it. You know, it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. I like to think of it in terms of catching up on the SDGs agenda. So that's 6 years of a slide back. So how can we catch up on that? By leveraging public value intelligence, by driving innovation. There's a gentleman in this room who told me once that monoculture does not scale. The forest scales. So if we're talking about localization of the SDGs, localization of innovation, data will play that key enabling role so that innovation can scale and we can move faster on the SDG agenda. Looking back at today's discussions, there are 3 things I want to highlight for you. Firstly, we need to pull together the existing use cases on data for development. And there are plenty. You heard about them from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, from India, from other countries, from the United Nations. How can we draw them together into a composite picture? Extract the learnings and share. This is the low-hanging fruit that the G20 must help us address. This is not about copy and paste, but it's about modular, white label adaptation in context. So pooling the learnings, pooling the use cases, extracting the intelligence, and turning them into these digital public goods that can be shared across the globe, particularly in the global south. Second, capacity development. This is the key for leveraging the data opportunity. And this goes hand in hand with the previous priority, which is the sharing of knowledge, sharing of use cases. So we are interested in building a know, practice, learn loop. Know what's out there, absorb the lessons, learn through this capacity development effort, and move on to the next stage of practice. The G20 should set an ambitious target in this regard. Let's say training 1 million data scientists, public officials, other stakeholders over the next 3 years, maybe half of them in Africa, and bringing together 10,000 plus use cases of data for development across the 17 SDGs into this capacity development initiative. The how of this collaborative capacity development effort is very important. This has to be networked. It should not duplicate existing efforts, but bring them together and give them scale. And this is possible today. We've got examples of such efforts in specific domains, so building common competency frameworks, pooling training resources, pooling trainers, bringing it all together in an interactive environment where micro-learning credentials can be picked by practitioners anywhere. And also supporting this capacity development with a shared infrastructure. With infrastructure that allows people to build their own data sets, to curate their own data, build their own AI models and knowledge graphs using that data. Without that practice opportunity, it'll remain theoretical learning. So as I said before, the first aspect goes hand in hand with the second aspect. My third and last point is on this data for the SDGs aspect. We need to create these sectoral data spaces, let's call them data commons, which are neutral, universally accessible, transparent, and well-regulated. This is not rocket science. There are efforts that exist already. Under the EU's data strategy, Gaia-X is a practical effort to develop public-private collaboration in areas like health, agriculture, and transport. The India Stack's move into health or account aggregation is another example. The United Kingdom's HDR is a third example that I'd like to quote. And if you look at the Gold Acre review that was done recently by the UK's NHS, you see the emphasis on putting together data sets, making them count, giving them scale, giving them diversity so that they can be pulled together for really innovative solutions to health problems. And there are efforts outside of the government domain. The International Digital Health and AI Research Collaborative in Geneva, the CRAFT Fund, the Complex Risk Analytics Fund within the United Nations systems, that is helping drive the WFP's hunger map, and so on. In these data commons, infrastructure, human resource, governance, and benchmarks can come together. We can come together, governments, international organizations, and other stakeholders to build gold standard data sets or flagship data sets in areas like climate change resilient agriculture. How are farmers responding to climate change? What are they planting? What are the kind of inputs they are using? This is akin to the effort that was put into the Green Revolution in the 1950s and 60s. And this can be data-driven this time. There is one last aspect to this notion of data commons, and that is democratizing the data and AI opportunity. There are nearly 3 billion people who are left out of the digital opportunity. And then within that digital divide, there is a yawning gap that's opening up on artificial intelligence and big data. So these data commons can help us democratize the digital opportunity, and as the SDGs slogan goes, leave no one behind. I want to close by emphasizing that the United Nations stands ready to work with the Indian G20 presidency and the ensuing presidency on this issue through the Office of the Secretary General's Tech Envoy, but also partners across the UN system, our co-host UNCTAD, UNEP, UNIDO, FAO, WHO, as well as multi-stakeholder partners and philanthropic actors to help the G20 realize this threefold outcome: building generalized use cases of data for development for wider adoption, a capacity development network to raise an army of data warriors for the SDGs, and creating global data commons in 2 to 3 priority SDG areas. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Gill, for those very important summary that you have offered us, as well as a roadmap that we need to work towards. Let me now invite the co-chair of the Development Working Group, Ambassador Nagaraj Naidu, to deliver the closing remarks.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks to all our partners who have helped in putting today's event together. We had a very intense morning today. While the broad context of data for development was laid out by a very passionate welcome address by India's G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, we had key interventions by Her Majesty Queen Maxima, Sri Rajiv Chandrasekhar, Union Minister for Electronics and IT, and Sri Nandan Nilayan Kani, former Chairman UIDAI. The underlining thread in all their interventions was how trusted data can empower individuals and societies. Session 1 on rejuvenating legacy systems, moderated by the very able ORF Senior Fellow Sunaina Kumar, saw Shamika Ravi talk about the power that data holds in today's society. Whether it's the telling tale of a 60-fold increase in women in India contesting elections, or the disproportionately large amount of time, an average of 7 valuable hours that women in India spend each day in servicing the largely unpaid, or rather underpaid care economy, and which unfortunately finds no reflection in GDP calculation. Abhishek Singh, President and CEO of National E-Governance, gave several ground-level but path-breaking examples of how data is being deployed in India for resolving population-scale challenges. Yoichi Ida, Deputy Director General for G7 and the G20 from Japan, underlined Japan's initiative of data free flow with trust and the importance of sharing data and learnings from the India model. And finally, Sakar bin Ghalib, Executive Director of AI and Digital Economy from the UAE, talked about the transformative value of data consent in ensuring quality and efficient service delivery, and the need to reward the very individual who is generating data. Plenary session 2 on leveraging IoT, big data and AI for SDGs, ably again moderated by Asta Kapoor of Apti Institute. So Abdul Rahman Habib of Saudi's AI Authority underlined the importance of empowering people through education and the need for data quality. Anil Chowdhury, Policy Advisor for the Government of Bangladesh, gave examples of how AI was applied in Bangladesh during the COVID period to ensure calibrated lockdowns as well as to ensure food supply. He also emphasized the need for privacy protection, cross-border data sharing, greater public, private, and academic collaboration, and the need to bridge the growing digital divide. Anita Gurumurthy, founding member and executive director of IT for Change, again underscored the need for high-quality data, the need for standards for data interoperability, ensuring a delicate balance between innovation, privacy, and regulation, discoverability, and the idea of data reciprocity, and the suggestion for the G20 to explore public financing for creating digital public infrastructure. Anthony Ria, director at the World Meteorological Organization, talked about free and open exchange of data to enable its users to take immediate actions, as also interoperability of data. We also had 2 breakout sessions. One of the breakout sessions was on the role of governments and international organizations in D4D, moderated by the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Technology, Ambassador Amandeep Gill, in which the context was set by Torbjörn Fredriksson of the UNCTAD. In this session, participants emphasized the need for robust stakeholder consultation across all ages and the important role that governments can play in laying the guardrails over which innovation could thrive. Capacity building for people in using data was emphasized. A mention was made of the Global Digital Compact, which is expected to outline shared principles for an open, free, and secure digital future for all. In this context, data protection and data commons was also mentioned. Digital technologies to facilitate the transformation of agri-food systems was emphasized by the FAO, and also we had a mention of the value of annotated data sets. The breakout session on the role of civil society, academia, philanthropic organizations, private sector, and entrepreneurs in data for development was moderated by Samir Saran, President ORF. Dr. Santosh Matthew from the BMGF set the context. He used a very evocative story of how data can save lives. Participants in this session highlighted that quality and reliability of data was extremely critical. The academia can play a key role in training data practitioners to collect data and measure impact, and in leveraging disaggregated data sets. The role of non-governmental stakeholders in enhancing data empowerment of communities and developing digital public goods was also underscored. Since the 17 SDGs are cross-cutting, the idea of creating localized data sets and identifying indicators which could interact with each other to influence national social outcomes that can create a multiplier impact was also put forward. To bring this session to a close, ladies and gentlemen, data is the lifeblood of decision making as well as the raw material for accountability. Today in the private sector, analysis of big data is commonplace, with consumer profiling, personalized services, and predictive analysis being used for marketing, advertising, and management. Similar techniques could perhaps be adopted to gain real-time insights into people's well-being and to target aid interventions to vulnerable groups. New sources of data, new technologies, and new analytical approaches, if applied responsibly, can enable more agile, efficient, and evidence-based decision-making, and can better measure progress on the Sustainable Development Goals in a way that is more inclusive, just, and fair. India's G20 presidency precisely aims at this very outcome. Thank you all for your very attention.